So many people have bought into this lie that if you work hard enough, you will be successful. Um, Here's the thing. People say if you truly want to be like rich and powerful, it's not about working hard. It's about working smart. Now that is semi-true, but that is also false if you dig deep enough. If you really want true power, true political power, true financial power, ridiculous riches, that's all about connections. That's all about who you know. Certain people from certain environments will never be accepted and will never be allowed into certain positions of power, regardless of how qualified they are. You know, um, I'll use myself as an example, right? I'll tell a story of myself. Now, before I do that, anyone of any walk of life, any race, I'm not going to say any gender because men are vastly smarter than women, and that's just a harsh reality. But any man of any race, I'll say, can achieve a lot of power, and financial success, definitely, if they go about it, in other ways. But I'm going to talk about why, the average guy who just works hard will not, achieve, power and financial success. See, a lot of things are predetermined, regardless of how hard you work. There are certain powers that be. There are cliques that are already in place. There are political groups, races, and religions, tied together that dictate who moves up and who doesn't. So people judge you. Let's say you want to, like I said, I'll use myself as an example. I am a Middle Eastern man, right? Kind of tan. Some people think I'm white. Some people can tell I'm not. But anyways, when I was a kid, my mom would always try to get me to hang out with the rich white kids. She always wanted me to fit in with the rich white kids because she knew that their parents had connections. Their parents were successful and owned businesses, and some of them were millionaires. But the problem with that was that the white kids, their families always looked at me like I was an outsider, right? And to a degree, I was. Now, I was leaps and leagues ahead of a lot of these white kids I was hanging out with. Mentally, I was just way ahead of the curve. I could manipulate them and outsmart them and outperform them in almost any aspect of life. Physically, mentally, whatever. I was just superior to them, and that burned them up inside. But the thing was, I didn't fit in with that group. They didn't look at me as one of their own. So they would never, and they saw me as a threat. I'm an outsider who's smarter than them, better looking than them, and gets more women than them. They looked at me as a threat. They're not going to let you into their group. They want to neutralize you. See, I never had a chance of getting these rich white kids connections and getting the opportunities they have because, like I said, they would rather promote from within, right? They would rather lift each other up than bring an outsider in who's a threat, who could possibly dismantle their entire, little clique or whatever. So and I go off and I do my own things and I create my own wealth and my own power, my own way. But I do it. I'm a pioneer. I don't go to other groups and try to, you know, ask them to bring me in. A lot of people, especially in America, have that mentality. And I guess this video, it really is directed more towards men of color. There are, I guess it does apply to white people too, because even white people, it's only a very select group of white people at the top from a very specific background who are of very specific, religions and went to very specific universities. So even most white people will never make it to the top either. It's a very small hand picked, group of people that rise to, the highest levels of power, right? So, my this is my advice to maybe any men of color listening or any white guys who just don't have connections and weren't born into the right family. You're never gonna have the power like the Donald Trump power or the Rockefeller power, but you can have your own power by walking away from this society, walking away from the corporate ladder. Investing in yourself, hoarding your money, hoarding your resources, investing in things you can own physically and keep your eye on, that bring a return on your investment, that bring in passive income. Like real estate is a great example of how you can build your power. If you really know what you're doing in the stock market, that is a great way of building your power. Now, you're never going to have the power to, let's say, you know, necessarily be the governor or the senator or the president, but you can still have a lot of power and a lot of freedom and live a much better life than the average, wage slave who works a 9 to 5 until they're like 90 and then dies, can't even afford to retire. You can still live much better than those people. But get it out of your head that you're going to fit in with the elites and become one of them. That's never going to happen. That's never going to happen. An example I'm going to use, another example I want to use, and this is going to be the thumbnail of this video, is the character Stringer Bell from The Wire. If anyone has ever seen the show The Wire, it's basically about, black drug dealers in Baltimore, Maryland. And this particular drug dealer, Stringer Bell, he's played by Idris Elba. He was always more of a businessman than a gangster. He just happened to be born into, he was born in the hood or whatever. And he was, he thought like a businessman. He wanted to get into politics. He wanted to, use political connections to influence and use that to get access to like certain real estate and build his little empire in Baltimore. He wanted to like buy up all the real estate there and, be like pretty much own the city. But the the rich people, the rich white guys in power, and a few black guys, but they were lower end, who really ran Baltimore, they were never going to let him into their clique because they knew where he came from and they viewed him as nothing more than a gangster. Now, he couldn't help his upbringing. He couldn't help that he had to be a drug, be like a big drug dealer to get his money, to even get into real estate and all that stuff. He did what he had to do, but he never understood that because of his background, because people know who he is, he's never going to be accepted in that certain community that he's trying to get into so bad. So he would try to pay politicians and state senators, he would give them large amounts of money to bribe his way into power, and they would promise him power and they'd take his money and he wouldn't get in. They would just fuck him out of his money. And so his business partner, his drug, basically his drug partner, who's like one step above him. See, he was like the second in command. The guy above him is this character named Avon in The Wire. He's like the real head of the fucking, he's like the head drug dealer, right? Stringer is like the second in command. So the head, Avon, who's the king, Stringer's like the queen. Avon is like, what did I tell you about playing those away games? What did I tell you about going into groups where you don't fit in and trying to fit in with them and build power with them instead of sticking with your own group of people? He was, and the thing is, that the head drug dealer Avon always knew that he would never fit in with those people. Stringer would try to tell Avon, look, why don't we start going legit? Why don't we try to be like these politicians and these white businessmen? And but he always knew deep down that he would never be accepted and fit in with those people. But Stringer didn't. Stringer was delusional enough to think that he could somehow bribe his way into certain elite cliques of people, and that's never going to happen. So that didn't end up working for him. And on top of that, his own people started looking at him as a traitor. They were like, why do you want to try to go be with these, politicians and senators? Like they started looking at him as a traitor. So he ended up having both sides turn against him. He had the people who were with him since day one, they turned against him because they viewed him as a traitor. And, of course, these politicians, these senators, these governors, they never accepted him in their group anyway. So he was kind of left out in the cold. So the moral of the story is, and he eventually dies in the show, he ends up getting killed. But the thing is, don't be delusional enough to think you're going to fit in with certain groups of people that you weren't, that you didn't grow up around. If you weren't born into the royal family, if you weren't born into some elite, whatever group that has power, you're most likely not going to be able to weasel your way into that. So many people spend their lives chasing approval, chasing acceptance from other people and begging to be led into certain things. You'd be much better off saying fuck you, walking away, and just building your own little empire. Building your own little sort of group, your own little clique, than trying to beg for acceptance from another one. So I hope that made sense. I hope I didn't kind of go all over the place. But that's really just the moral of the story. Build your own power, build your own network, make your own group of, one more example. I'll use one more. The Mafia, right? Like the Italian mob. When they first came to America, they realized that America wanted to use them basically as like kind of like slave labor. Like they wanted to use them to just build the country, right? They wanted to use the Italians to just build the country and pay them dirt, right? Pay them shit. So a few of the Italians got together. They created the Mafia, right? They're like, look, we're tired of working for fucking pennies. We're tired of not really being accepted and treated like Americans and treated like equals, like we were promised. So they created the fucking mob. Now that might be a bit of an extreme example, but basically they were like, we're fed up of being treated like second class citizens. So we'll just become gangsters. We'll create our own power and we'll take what we want and we'll live lavishly and we'll live good our own way. We'll reject this society and do it our own way. So if you can adopt to a small degree, don't become don't try to, I mean, if you really want to, I guess you could, but don't try to become like a straight up gangster and like start a crime family, but have a little bit of that gangster edge in your personality where you're like, you know what, I'm going to walk away from this bullshit society and I'm going to create my own little world where I'm the top dog. And, I'll meet other people like me who I fit in with, who want to be in my little group, and we can sort of network with each other and build power and build wealth. And I don't have to beg and ask for handouts and try to fit in with people who are never going to accept me. So yeah, that's basically how you do it. You build your own little power and you say, fuck society, fuck the people who don't accept me, fuck the racists, and you build your own little group. That's how you do it.